Most people would rather give themselves an electric shock than sit alone with their thoughts. That's not a metaphor. And if you've ever reached for your phone the moment silence arrived, before you even realized you were doing it, you already understand why. Think about the last time you found yourself with a few unplanned minutes alone. No task waiting, no one needing something from you. Just a small pocket of quiet in the middle of your day. What did you do with it? Did you sit there for a moment, letting the silence settle? Or did your hand move almost automatically, reaching for your phone before the quiet could fully arrive? Most of us don't even notice when it happens. The moment silence appears, we replace it. A podcast, music, scrolling, anything to keep the space filled. And it feels harmless. But something strange happens in the moments when we don't fill it, when the noise runs out, when the silence gets there first. Because the moment the space opens, the mind moves in, not with calm, with its own kind of noise. Old conversations, unfinished decisions, embarrassing memories from years ago, things you're behind on, things you're afraid of, thoughts that suddenly feel much bigger than they did a moment ago. And the silence that was supposed to feel peaceful starts to feel surprisingly loud. So the question isn't just why we love noise. The more interesting question might be this: why are we so uncomfortable being alone with our own thoughts? In the 17th century, the philosopher Blaise Pascal once wrote something difficult to forget. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. At first glance, that sounds like an exaggeration, but sit with it for a moment. How much of what we do each day is a quiet escape from the room inside our own heads? The scrolling, the background music that's always on, the constant need to be somewhere, doing something, with someone. Not because we love the noise, but because the alternative feels harder than we expected. We are not running toward distraction. We are running from something else. In 2014, researchers at Harvard conducted a study that revealed something quietly unsettling. Participants were asked to sit alone in an empty room for 15 minutes. No phone, no reading material, nothing to do but think. What they found was striking. Many participants found the experience so uncomfortable that when given the option, they chose to administer mild electric shocks rather than continue sitting quietly with their own thoughts. Before the experiment, participants were shown a small device that could deliver a mild electric shock. Most said beforehand that they would even pay money to avoid being shocked. Yet in the silence of the room, many pressed it anyway. Not because they were unusual, not because they were dealing with something serious, simply because sitting quietly, with nowhere to go but inward, felt genuinely unbearable. Which raises an uncomfortable question. What is it about our own inner world that we have learned to fear? In the late 19th century, William James, often called the father of modern psychology, described the mind as a stream of consciousness, an uninterrupted, ever-moving current of thoughts, images, sensations, and associations. It doesn't pause when you do. It doesn't stop when you ask it to. In fact, when you remove the external current of noise and stimulation, the internal stream often grows louder, not because something has gone wrong, but because you have finally created enough quiet to hear what was always flowing beneath. That can feel like chaos, but it might be closer to honesty. If you listen carefully, not to stop it, but simply to hear it, the inner noise is rarely random. It tends to gather around a few familiar themes. Things left unfinished, things left unsaid, feelings set aside because there wasn't time, questions about who we are and whether we're doing this right.
Psychologists sometimes call this rumination, the mind returning again and again to unresolved emotional material, like a tongue finding a loose tooth. But here is something worth remembering. The noise is not your enemy. It is your mind trying to process what it hasn't yet had space to process. The anxiety in the quiet isn't proof that something is broken. It may be proof that something has been patient, waiting for a moment of stillness before finally asking to be heard. The problem is not that we have inner noise. That's just part of being human. The real problem is that we've never been taught how to listen to it without running away. Our instinct, almost universally, is to silence it. We reach for the phone, we fill the pause, we find something, anything that drowns the signal out. And in the short term, this works. The discomfort fades, the noise recedes, we feel relieved. But here is what silencing does not do. It doesn't resolve anything. The thoughts that felt too heavy to sit with don't disappear when we look away. They return to the stream, often louder, often less defined, often showing up later, in our sleep, in our impatience, or in the way we respond to people we love. Avoidance is not the same as rest, and distraction is not the same as peace.
There is, however, a more honest approach. One that doesn't sidestep the noise or try to overpower it, but instead moves gently toward it. Not to fix it, but to finally look at it clearly. And in doing so, change your relationship to it entirely. In acceptance and commitment therapy, there is a practice called cognitive diffusion. The idea is deceptively simple. Instead of treating your thoughts as facts to be believed or problems to be solved, you learn to observe them as events passing through awareness. Not, I am anxious, but I notice there is anxiety here. Not, I have failed, but there is a thought that says I have failed. The thought remains, but you are no longer inside it. You are watching it, the way you might watch a cloud slowly shift and change shape. This is what unraveling means here. Not pulling the thread until everything falls apart, but gently following it, curious rather than afraid, until you begin to see what it is actually made of. Most of our inner noise, when we finally turn and face it, turns out to be smaller than we imagined. Not harmless, but understandable. Not gone, but no longer in charge. There is also something interesting happening here neurologically. Research in affective neuroscience suggests that the act of labeling an emotion, simply naming what you're feeling, can reduce its intensity. Brain imaging studies show that putting words to an emotional state appears to reduce activity in the amygdala, the region most closely associated with the brain's threat response. Naming the noise doesn't make it disappear, but it can make it feel less overwhelming. The science in this area is still evolving, and individual experiences vary, but the broader idea that awareness and language can reshape our relationship to inner experience is something many therapeutic traditions recognized long before brain imaging arrived. If you'd like to begin practicing this, not perfectly, just gently, here are a few places to start. The next time you notice the urge to reach for distraction, pause for just a single breath before you do. Not to resist, simply to notice what you were about to move away from. When the noise is particularly loud, try naming it without judgment. Not, I'm a mess, but there is a lot of unease here right now. That small shift in language creates a small shift in distance, and distance is where observation becomes possible. If you find a thought that keeps returning, the same worry, the same regret, the same question appearing again and again, it may be worth asking quietly, what would this thought need in order to feel heard? Sometimes the mind repeats itself not because it's broken,
but because it hasn't yet felt listened to. Here is something that takes time to learn, but may be worth holding on to. The people who seem most at ease, not those who perform calm, but those who carry it genuinely, are rarely the ones with fewer thoughts or quieter minds. They are often the ones who have become, slowly and imperfectly, less afraid of what lives inside them. They have learned that the noise, when met with patience rather than panic, tends to soften, that the thoughts which once felt like intruders can gradually begin to feel like information, not comfortable always, but no longer foreign. The world is extraordinarily good at filling silence. There will always be something ready to flood the space the moment you create it. But real silence, the kind you sit with rather than run from, is one of the few places left where you can truly hear yourself think. Not the performed version of yourself, not the self that's managing and producing and keeping up, the quieter one underneath, the one that has always been there, waiting for a moment when the noise stopped long enough to speak. You don't have to silence your thoughts to find peace. You only have to stop running from them. So before you move on to the next thing, and there is always a next thing, stay here for a moment. Let the noise come. Don't reach for the volume dial. Just listen. Not to fix it, not to solve it, just to know what's there. Be still and let the mind speak.